another episode of the BREWtally Speaking Podcast, the official podcast of MetalNexus.net, MetalNexus.net, where you can get all your show reviews, music news, and interviews, and so much more. Head on over to MetalNexus.net and keep up with everything that they have going on. And keeping up with everything going on is my co-host, Daniel Terry. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good tonight, John. It's warm outside, which I'm super stoked about. It was like 60 degrees yesterday and today. I'm like walking around in like my little Daisy Dukes. Everybody's like, dude, you need to stop. Your dick's hanging out. And I'm like, well, you know, it's warm out and I feel good about my body. So that's what I've been up to. How about you?
I have been working tirelessly doing interviews and continuing to do interviews and then working. It's funny, when I quit my job to work for myself, quote unquote, where I basically work a job that I can do whenever I want, and then focus on the podcast, no one told me that I would be working exponentially longer and harder than I did at a normal 9 to 5.
It's like, hey, asshole, nothing in life is easy. Here you go.
I mean, I think it speaks to the fact that I'm very driven and motivated to succeed. However, when you're literally working like, oh, I guess I just worked like a 15-hour day, and then I'm going to come home and eat dinner and see my wife for a couple minutes, and then I'm going to lock myself in a room and work on podcasts for like 7 hours. It's like, well, that's like almost 24 hours. And you only slept for 4 hours, and then you're waking up and doing it again. Okay, like that makes sense. So,
yeah, I'd like to say I work that hard, but I do it my actual job, but
yeah. Well, I have a fear of failure, and yeah. So, and I want to succeed in everything I do, and I almost have like a weird, I want to stick it to a non-existent somebody, just to be like, yeah, I fucking did it. Fuck you. But that person doesn't exist, so it's really just this inner thing I have with myself where I'm super competitive against myself.
Hey, brother, it's all good, because as long as I don't have to compete with you, because I am too lazy, and I wouldn't say I'm not as dedicated. I'm very dedicated, but man, I don't know, 7-8 hours. I don't know where I could find the time in the day with me and my army of children.
Yeah, well, you have another one on the way, so you're slowly building a Bjork army.
Jesus, yeah. Probably take over the world soon. Before you know it, like, every kid in America is going to be all like, In Flames kind of sucks. So there's going to be, watch out for that. It's the New World Order.
There you go. But we have two guests on this episode. We have Mark Vollelunga and Daniel Oliver, guitar player and bassist respectively for the band Nothing More. This is a fun one. I was kind of nervous going into this because I don't know. This is like one of those bands that like they're the big band right now. Everyone's talking about. They're selling out really decent sized clubs. Usually getting on. Just got done doing some of those Five Finger Death Punch arena tours and such, and we don't really dip into this territory of dealing with some of these bigger bands like this, and so it definitely makes me feel like I got to bring my fucking A game when doing an interview. And the funny thing is, like you always hear with these kind of people in these bands, couldn't have been nicer and couldn't have been easier to talk to.
Yeah, they seem like some pretty chill, down to earth dudes. For being in the band that's that big. I mean, I know they were humble about it, but like, it's not very often I hear a rock band that like isn't like super duper like heavy or gimmicky or something that I've even actually heard of. Most of the time that genre goes right over my head. But I've heard of these guys. I like what they're throwing down, and I enjoyed how, you've definitely talked to bands that are much less popular than this, but it still felt like just some dudes talking instead of like it being, I don't know, some kind of weird, like, oh my God, how do you guys feel being like one of the better rock bands, like ever?
I mean, we definitely touched on that with the Grammy nod and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, you did, but you didn't say it like a total dweeb. I guess that's what I'm getting at. That's the one nice thing I'll give you today for free.
Oh, okay. Yeah, everyone gets one.
Yep.
But no, it was a lot of fun, and the interesting thing was too, and I kind of felt bad because like I know we've talked about this a couple of times, and we'll segue this into what I'm currently drinking tonight. But it was one of those things where we start talking about the fact that the band had the day off the night before and got into Grand Rapids the night before, obviously, and as such, Mark ended up going and having some Founders beer. And so we started talking about Founders beer, and I don't know that publicists tell the guests, ahead of time, like, hey, this is a podcast that kind of talks about beer, or can potentially talk about this. So when Mark and I started talking about the Founder's beer that he had and some of the stuff that they've got in general, and Daniel obviously talking about like, oh, I didn't go, and FOMO is a real thing and so forth, that it was one of those things when we were done, Mark was like, oh man, I was really stoked we were talking about beer up front, and I was like kind of bummed that we didn't keep talking about it, which is good. I do definitely enjoy talking to various people about the various beers, and I think being a band of Nothing More's caliber, or really any of the bands, if people are into drinking beer, coffee, tea, whatever, they're in a unique position where they've traveled the world over, presumably a couple of times at any time that we're talking to them. So they really have such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to like, well, I really like stouts, but let me tell you, when you go to Europe, the European stouts are just so much better, or coffee is so much better over here when we went to South America, or things like that. That I feel like as someone who may be a fan of any of those kind of things, you're going to be offered a completely different experience that you may not ever get to live yourself. So it's kind of nice sometimes to live vicariously through some of these other people and the experiences they get to have outside of music. And I think that's kind of the one thing I do personally enjoy about trying to talk about beer, liquor, coffee, and tea, and whatever people are into trying to drink, because you know what? The world is huge. And I'm not going to be able to drink every beer in the world, and I'm not going to be probably able to go to half of these places that some of these people have.
Not with that attitude.
Well, not with this financial situation either. But
yeah, no shit.
But with that being said, it's sometimes really cool just to get a completely different perspective on these things, and kind of be able to bond over a shared experience in some instances. So, and I think that's the point of any of these things, whether you drink beer, whether you drink liquor, whether you drink coffee, whether you are a connoisseur of teas, loose leaf tea and all that, is just being able to sit down, have a cup of whatever it is that you enjoy, and have a fun conversation. And I kind of dig that about that. And I dig that about, it's basically what Dan and I do, and that's why we introduced it into this podcast. So it was kind of fun being able to talk to Mark and Daniel about that for a little bit in this interview, before we got down to the serious thing of the band itself and their new record and so forth. Who would you like to talk to about beer from the band?
Probably Gwar. Is that weird? Anybody from Gwar talking about beer, because I just feel like they would introduce me to a lot of stuff that I probably would not have tried on my own.
Well, they have a Gwar bar in Richmond, I believe.
Okay, well, let me know what time you'll be there, and
We'll do a live podcast from there.
That'd be amazing. Yeah, no, I'd like to talk about beer with them. I really, even like Rammstein, I would like to talk to them about beer.
What kind of beer do you think they like, group?
Half a Weizen, man.
Okay, I could see that.
I could too.
What about a Pilsner or a Kelly? You think they drink that?
Pilsner, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think debating what beers bands drink aside, let's get into my conversation with Mark Vollelunga and Daniel Oliver of Nothing More, and we will talk to you guys when we get back.
It doesn't fit like in my arms, like.
Oh really?
Like I can't like that's all I got, and that hurts.
Really?
Yeah.
You can't straighten your arms?
No, everything else is great.
That's crazy.
It's like right there.
Oh,
It's a good sitting jacket.
Piece of shit jacket's what it is. It looks cool though, so I didn't have the heart to throw it away. Like maybe one day.
You could just make it sleeveless.
Give it to somebody else.
Yeah.
So I have the pleasure this early afternoon of talking to Mark Vollelunga and Daniel Oliver of Nothing More. How are you two guys doing today?
Good. How are you?
Doing good. Been busy today preparing for this and the week I have coming up. But you guys are here in Grand Rapids on tour. Apparently had a day off and got to enjoy some local eatery and beers. What was the beer that you had over at Founders?
Which
one did
I think
we
I think I
have?
had like 8. Except that doesn't mean I'm a drunk. I just got flights,
Right.
Yeah. So I had the Kentucky Breakfast Stout, the
Okay.
Canadian Breakfast Stout, the Barley Wine Ale. I love what was it? There was like this crazy raspberry one that was awesome.
Was it the port wine?
Yes, yeah.
So good.
I had that one. I had the Nitro Rubaeus or something like that.
See,
Yeah.
what you got to do is mix the Nitro Ubeus and the Nitro Breakfast Stout. So good. And then the Blushing Monk is really good. That's out right now.
Yeah, I had that one as well. Man, and they had a lemon one that was just amazing. A barrel aged like lemon ale or something, and I think that was my favorite, just because it was so different and unique. I'm a big Founders fan for sure.
It was funny when I was watching a digital tour bus with you earlier. You were talking about Shinerbach and how you didn't have any. So I almost thought about going out and getting some because it seemed like that was more the beer the band really enjoyed. And then I was like, well, I don't know, maybe they got around to Founders or not, because it seems like some people, like, I love going to Founders and watching people be like, what do you have that's like Bud Light or something similar to that? And you're like, nothing.
Yeah, leave.
So, wow, what did you end up getting?
I actually didn't go. We all kind of started getting sick in Chicago, and it kind of hit home yesterday for me. But I'm feeling a little better. So, but yeah, I love beer. It's funny though, thinking of going to a place like Founders and ordering Miller Lite. One time, many moons ago, I had a Mr. Beer kit, and got to make my own beer. I didn't know what, I was young, and the internet wasn't like fully kicking then, I guess. So yeah, I ended up just making like a really high-end Miller Lite tasting beer, which is a waste. But at the same time, though, it goes to show you like how delicious it kind of is when it's totally fresh.
I mean, it's a standby classic for a reason.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true.
We didn't have you here to talk about beer, sadly, as much as, with all your traveling, I'm sure you could talk about many great beers and spirits that you guys have had over your travels. But, your most recent record, The Stories We Tell Ourselves, in listening to it over the last little while, something I've kind of noticed about it that I think is really interesting, but I think it really speaks to the quality that the band puts out consistently, is that it seems like you have more of a focus on creating an experience each record specifically, as opposed to just, here's the collection of songs we wrote in this 6 months. Is that something that you strive to really work toward, or is this something that just kind of naturally happens between the four of you?
No, it's definitely something that we strive for. Some of our favorite records are like Dredge El Cielo. It's definitely an experience like you're talking about, and I think I'd definitely compare like some of our stuff to that, and that it's almost like watching a movie or something, and it's like start to finish, it's like your ear goes on this journey, and there's so many cool pieces of music that are little segue pieces, and that tend to be forgotten about, and end up getting written out of a song or something like that. And so our way of saving those pieces is to make little instrumentals here and there, and kind of be artists about it and have fun, and then at the same time like incorporate like little audio clips like with Alan Watts, and tie more the record together and find those themes and whatnot. Sorry, my voice is...
Got that radio voice going right now.
I should have done the right thing and not gone out yesterday.
That's no good story. Talks about how I just stayed at home and did nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, FOMO's a real thing out here on the road, that's for sure.
Well, I mean, you got to get your Instagram things going, and you see someone else somewhere else, you're like, oh, fuck, I should have gone.
Yeah,
Right.
Social media be damned. It's still hanging with the boys,
Yeah.
You don't have that much fun on the bus typically, but...
Kind of speaking to those, musical intros and so forth, I kind of noticed that on at least the last two that I can recall for sure, you have those audio samples that you use, and I was going to, if I had spare time today, try to put them all together and look at the lyrics and see if there's any overlapping theme from record to record, and see if it creates its own kind of piece, like its own full-on song. Based on your reaction, I'm assuming that wasn't really anything that you've been waiting for fans to do and put together.
No, I'd never thought of that before. That'd be really cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely possible. Like people ask us all the time if we write if we purposefully write concept records. And I think, like, the concept record, if you can actually pull it off, is like this golden egg that every musician hopes to achieve at some point. But I think I've found, though, with our writing, like, we all participate in the lyrical aspect, and it takes all of us connecting on a topic for it to get the go-ahead to be, slaved over well before it even gets considered to be put on the record. So, I do think what you do end up finding is that we've all kind of had the similar struggles our whole adolescence and early adulthood, and it is like kind of a lot of the same themes gone over again, and it would be kind of cool to go back and like chart our personal growth, if you will, like listening back through the records. But no, nobody's ever done that. That would be kind of cool.
It was just one that I knowing how much it seems like you guys are meticulous in the presentation of the band and the music, it seemed like one of those little things that was like, I bet they've been like planting these seeds all along. So when you guys got to the very cinematic interludes and outros and such on the songs to kind of make it a cinematic thing, that it'd almost be kind of like, oh, here's kind of the prequel of everything on the last record. Now we're giving you more of this story, and then continuing on with it maybe with the next record. And therefore, those who are paying attention to everything being presented are going to get a fuller representation of what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
We're not that awesome.
Yeah. I mean, Johnny might secretly be doing that, but I don't think he can keep that kind of secret. The best example I think I've ever heard of that is off of the Thrice Alchemy Index. I don't know if you're a fan, but yeah, they have like the same cadence on the same, what do you call those songs at the end of each EP?
I mean, they're songs, but
they're songs, yeah, but they all have the same melody. They're all totally different sounding, but same melody, different lyrics, and
that was so neat.
It was a cool idea.
Definitely some of my favorite pieces of music, with just the last line in every song being the same melody, but having different lyrics and it being in a different style too, which is extremely epic. And so it's such an Easter egg, for a musician and somebody into that band.
I think one of the biggest mindfucks I've ever found on a record was Meshuggah's Catch 33. And when you have the CD, because it's just one long song.
Right.
But when you put it on a CD and it's broken into, I think, like 10 tracks or something, every time, I think, other than one, like track 9 or something, when you skip, it comes back right to the beginning of the beat. No matter where you skip on the song. It is really like a really like clever mindfuck that it's like, I couldn't even imagine being like, all right, so we know this pattern repeats. Let's make every track number start where the beat starts, back on the 1. And it's like, wow, that's really incredible. It's a really fun trick to play on someone with a CD player. Like, I put it on track like 3, and they're like, this is the same song.
Yeah, I love stuff like that. One thing I miss now that everything's gone digital is like the bonus track. Like you'd get an album, and then 20 minutes after it's over, like something swells in. Yeah. I always thought that was cool. The last one we did, it was a record that it was before Johnny was singing, even. It was a record called Save You, Save Me, and I think like 19 minutes after, we put this like funk song on it that started with a melodica in the beginning, real like loud and pronounced. And I remember this is like MySpace days. I was responding to like personal messages people were sending, and this guy was like, yeah, man, jammed your record all the way through, and not thinking, he just left his stereo like super loud, and he said that bonus track came in, and it scared the shit out of him. And he spilled a bunch of coffee all over himself or something like that.
Yeah, had to go to the hospital, Yeah, we got sued, know.
It's a great song, guys.
Kind of talking about a varied band's careers, between Thrice or even a Meshuggah and stuff like that. Something I think you kind of share with some of them is your Grammy nominations for this record. And it was kind of funny in looking up, just kind of the songs that got nominated and so forth. Just seeing these weird blogs all over the internet where people were like, there's this band that the Grammys have apparently deemed like the best rock band or alternative or whatever, but we've never heard of them. And I feel like you guys have been pretty present, actively touring quite a bit, getting on really great tours and being on active radio and even terrestrial radio and so forth. So I kind of felt like it was very distasteful to write something like an op-ed piece like that, and to see so many was kind of shocking. And it kind of made me wonder, like, do the Grammy nods even matter to you, in light of the criticisms you kind of get in that realm, and or is it just kind of making you feel like maybe you are the flag bearers for the underground rock scene? quote unquote?
No, it's definitely more the latter, I'd say. I mean, we're extremely honored, to have been nominated. It's definitely something that you hope to achieve at some point in your life. So that's totally awesome. But yeah, it does tell me that it's like, man, people have really forgotten about rock. And it's like, because like you're saying, we've done all these things. We've been touring. We've been in front of a lot of people. But for the general public not to know who we are, it's like, wow, rock has totally been forgotten.
Yeah, really, to think that, like, the Foo Fighters are the only, like, rock band still going. I don't know, even for, like, a tastemaker, someone even writing an article I never even thought about that. Like, would they not Google who has, like, number one singles on rock radio and stuff like that?
Right.
But, the rock world is definitely in a bit of a depression as far as just, like, mass mainstream appeal goes, but it doesn't matter, like at the end of the day, rock and roll to me, I think, is still a very pure thing. Like, it's something that can't be bought. You can get songwriting help on songs, and some bands do just straight up play songs that like other people will have written, but at the end of the day, like, the crowd speaks, and if it's not cool, then it doesn't go anywhere. And I love that about rock and roll. Like, out here, there's not one manufactured product. Like, it's a bunch of people just huffing it with their heart and soul, and whether or not we make $1 million or not, it doesn't have anything to do with it, because everyone's here because they love it. We're not chasing stardom. We're doing what we feel is the most important thing in the world. So.
I think that's also representative in a lot of the bands that you have either opened for, or in the sense of when you started being a headliner. Like, a mutual friends band, Wilson. I know, like, you guys, last time I saw you guys was at the Loft when you were on that headlining run with them a couple years ago at this point. And it was just kind of crazy to see, even then, how of a dedicated fan base you had. It was more, I felt like when I was there, it's like I had heard the songs on the radio, but I hadn't seen you guys live. And to see such fanaticism out of the fans for such a quote-unquote young band, even though there's, a whole history of you before even having Johnny be your vocalist and so forth, that it just made me feel like that perhaps... it just made me feel like that perhaps I was missing out on something.
Sorry, it totally got distracted.
Yeah, I know, this is hard to concentrate. Let me see if I can fix this.
Yeah, I think it's coming through, like, the PA up here. Hope this isn't live.
No.
You can edit this out.
It's fine.
Sorry, what was the last thing you said, though?
Just basically saying that, that I think, it's been interesting to me to see the climb, and even so early on, a couple years ago with that Wilson tour, feeling like, seeing the diehard fanaticism of your fans so early on made me feel like I was missing out on something. And it's been really interesting to see just the natural progression you guys have taken since then. And, is it kind of a trip to even see how far you've come in such a short amount of time yourselves? Like, you guys went from I think the Loft is an 800 cap room, to now here basically almost sold out. I think probably by doors you will be, of I think this is a 2200 cap room. So
yeah. I mean, I don't know. When we got into this, we started back in 2005. That's when we took the vow of poverty, as we call it, and. It was 10 years of building them one at a time, one by one fan at a time, just going regionally. We kind of gave ourselves like a 500-mile radius, because that's all you can really do without anyone helping you. So yeah, getting into it, we didn't really know what the A to B was going to look like, and we didn't expect it to take that long. It took us 10 years, before we got on with 11-7, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I'd say that, like, the last 5 years is been incredible. Like, it's been awesome seeing, like, just finally establishing ourselves kind of as a worldwide name in rock and roll, and then just kind of how the world opened up for us in a much larger extent when we released the second record on 11-7, The Stories We Tell Ourselves. And I don't know, it's been a wild ride. I'd say most bands that have been together as long as we have kind of start to run out of ideas, or soften, or I don't know. This is like where Incubus starts to suck kind of stride, I feel like.
So this is to some, anything after Morning View is where that band fell off. But to me, I think It's a Crow Left in the Murder was a really solid record.
I did too.
And then after that, they kind of lost me.
Yeah, but I guess, yeah, me too. I guess my point is it's been cool to grow as a band, and in the last 5 years, I feel like we've grown not only in like number wise as far as people paying attention, but also musically. Like, I don't feel like we're anywhere near out of ideas or anywhere near out of steam to just like keep plugging away to make some of the coolest music out there, and that's like really encouraging to me. But yeah, we're stoked.
You had something to say on the Incubus tip.
Yeah, but no, I was just gonna say we're all huge Incubus fans.
Yeah, huge fans.
Yeah, and yeah, have listened to everything they put out since. They definitely lost some edge, as soon as Dirk left the band or whatever happened there. And I mean, Ben Kinney's he's a phenomenal bass player for sure. It's just different.
Yeah,
that's all. And to me, it was just like, ooh. Like Dirk really had an impact on a lot of the writing and a lot of the style, I think, that came out.
Yeah, and one thing we're not afraid to do is evolve, and that's something we look forward to doing. I mean, it's art. You can't really criticize any of it. If it speaks to people, then it does. Like, even bands that you wish didn't change, they're people. They're genuine in what they're doing, and you have to applaud them for going with their heart and not with going with what sells necessarily. So.
Totally, yeah. You can't write the same record,
Something that I find pretty interesting about you guys, with all being, correct me if I'm wrong, I know at least 3/4 of you are multi-instrumentalists, and having such a huge hand in all writing together lyrically and everything. Has there been a facet sonically that you haven't tapped into that you guys would like to, maybe on this upcoming record, or demos that you have that haven't been released or whatever, that go in completely different directions?
Yeah, oh yeah, and I think the answer to that question is
the ukulele.
Well, yeah.
Mark's been playing the ukulele recently, so.
Yeah. Well, no, it's all right. I was just gonna say more in the traditional sense that it's like, yeah, they're like the ukulele. And like the piano, probably having more traditional songs, or similar to, I don't know, more Beatles, or I don't think we really have, songs that just like, oh, okay, this is just all on piano, even though we're a rock band, and that's something I think that excites us, and just getting into more of a classic approach. At the same time, it's like, I know I'm gonna get an 8-string here in the summer, and
Don't do it, Mark.
I will, for sure. No, but to keep going on all directions. And I think that's something a lot of bands lose sight of. They get excited about this certain type of music, and it's like, okay, now every song that they do on this album is like this style, instead of like just everything is growing at the same time. And we're very aware of that, and we want that to happen, just getting softer and getting heavier at the same time.
Yeah, but the world's, I don't even know what the expression is, but take like Zeppelin, like they have almost island style music at points,
Yeah.
But it's some of their best songs, and it's like, how the hell did they bridge that? It's still totally Zeppelin, but it just has this crazy like other feel to it. So I think we're 100% down to explore things like that makes sense. Nobody likes a stark departure from what you know, but if you can tie in some other stuff, then some real genius can happen.
Yeah, it was really interesting today, and I wish I would have been looking at my phone to see what song made me think of this. One of the songs had a very strong Depeche Mode vibe, from the phrasing of the guitar notes and the sounds and the tone and all that. Do you know exactly the song?
One of our songs?
There's actually 2 on this record that are very similar. There's like the footsteps, or walking in my shoes, or whatever. Yep. Actually, Don't Stop that we're listening to. The melody's pretty similar. You stumble in my footsteps, keep the same upon what I've got, and we don't stop, whoa, we don't stop. Like a shotgun in a fist fight. Yeah, pretty similar. And then there is, like you're saying, I think you Go to War, because dun 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 dun. your own personal Jesus. And it's
Yeah, kind of has that like industrial-ish kind of sound to it.
Yeah, a lot of the percussive elements are similar in that sort of 6/8 type of sound and vibe.
That it was kind of funny. Are you familiar with the guitar player Nick DePero from Night Verses?
No, I'm not. I've heard some of their stuff, and I definitely respect it for sure.
There's some of you're playing with your leads over like your rhythms and stuff, and a lot of the effects used remind me a lot of how he plays because he does since it's a power trio basically now. But like all three of those guys are just phenomenal musicians. I mean, are now being in the Fever 333, just killing everybody.
Yeah.
But it was just kind of weird, like seeing some of these parallels between some other, to me, some kind of lesser known bands or maybe not obvious influences kind of shining through. I kind of wanted to ask you, Daniel. The Scorpion Tail. A lot has been made about that. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a gimmick, but I feel like at times that seems to be what a lot of fans focus on from when they go to see you live.
Mm-hmm.
What? Because I know you've had this thing since even being a small, like not being able to have bigger, box trucks and stuff to bring this thing with you. So I know this has been something that's been with the band for a while. But where did the initial concept for this come? And were you kind of ever worried that maybe it would overshadow the band?
No, I was never afraid anything would overshadow the band, just mainly because at the end of the day, it's about songs. You can be the best opening band in the world and opening for the worst rock band in the world, and just people being familiar with that crappy band's music, like, elevates. As bad as a band could get, they're always going to be better than you are, just based on familiarity and song strength. So I never worried about that because of that aspect. But no, I grew up, I wouldn't say I'm like an extreme sports junkie, nor am I an adrenaline junkie, but growing up, I loved racing things. Like, I've raced RC cars, go-karts, motocross, hare scrambles. I've got into have my glider pilot's license, stuff like that. And I just love, there's something about like there's just a lot of energy. Like, if you go to a supercross race and you watch those guys clearing the triple, there's this like chaos to all that weight and speed, like flying through the air and landing as it does. And I have a bit of a mechanical background, and that's just kind of what I wanted to create on stage. Like, I've done a lot of distance running, and some of the coolest moments I've had have been when I'm just like hammered on endorphins, like 15 miles into a run, like, and the music's hitting, everything's grooving, and then a storm blows in, to kind of give like a big physical, like, environmental element to what I'm feeling and what I'm hearing. And that was kind of my vision with the Scorpion Tail and all that. Like, the original idea for what the Scorpion Tail does was Johnny's. He wanted to DJ the band, quote unquote, because DJs will take pre-recorded music and chop and screw it and pitch bend and stuff like that. And all in all, it's cool stuff. It's always sonically very impressive, but visually it's just like it could be an iPod. Right. And so he actually had this little wireless MIDI controller he brought into the jam room one day, and we piped the guitar and bass and some of the drums through a computer, and in real time he was able to manipulate that live audio just over this simple riff we created, and it was awesome. And it's like, whoa, man, like, this has never been done before. Like, sounds freaking huge, and it's a neat concept. But when I watched him do it there in the jam room, it's like, this is lame. We can't, if we're gonna do it, let's like,
can't be on stage playing a video game controller.
Yeah. So I, really, I just wanted to give a big, like, violent representation, visual representation of what everybody's hearing. And that was, what the Scorpion Tail became. And I had no idea how I was going to get there. Just kind of started going. So, and 1,000 hours later, that thing was sitting in the garage.
Has it or will it morph as the album cycles? Like I said, I've only seen you the one time, so I can't speak to it since, but
yeah.
Do you add to it? Does it keep morphing into more or whatever?
To be determined. Scorpion Tail, it was created for this album cycle, or I will say this, it was finished when this album cycle started, and that was kind of a part of this album cycle show. And I already have another big creation planned, like, for the next record, and so the Scorpion Tail in and of itself is a functioning digital instrument. Where it's going to end up on stage or how it's going to be used in the future is to be determined, but it works, and that the thing that lifts Drumtron into the air, it works. Will it always have Scorpion Tail attached? I don't know. It might have more drums attached at some point. I don't know how it's all going to, like, suss out in the end, but it's there, it's heavy, and it's not going anywhere, so.
Kind of two questions that just kind of spurred from what you were saying. One, in a foreshadowing, let's say you get to, play across the street here and play at the Van Andel and you guys are the headlining band. What do you see an arena-size stage look like? Like, what do you have, since you're already talking about another idea for the next record, have you already thought about, like, in the perfect world, if we get to this level, I would love to do X, Y, and Z on a stage show?
No, I'm pretty much out of ideas. No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, one thing I like, and how I kind of see the metal work is that it facilitates creativity for all of us. Like, yeah, ideally, 10 years from now, there's going to be more creations, and I envision us at some point kind of all having a station of just ways to make different sounds and different performance art, if you will. Because at the end of the day, we're all players, We're up there to make music, and it's fun to just put songs away for a minute and do something interesting and that pushes you. But yeah, when it comes to the arena, I do have an idea for, like, a traveling circus tent where I really would like to control the environment, if you will, and have, I don't know, be able to utilize, like, all of the space in a room custom created for the show. I don't want to give too many ideas away, but yeah, we'll get there.
And then, kind of talking about Johnny manipulating you guys, like, what you're jamming on live and even in the live actual, performance of it. Has there ever been thought of doing, like, a Linkin Park Reanimated type thing with some of your music? Like, just a remix EP or anything?
That's a good idea. Can we take that idea?
I mean, as long as you give me one.
Yeah.
Well, kind of, sort of. It's like there is, like, a remixed version of This the Time or Ballast.
Right.
Yeah. And that was pretty fun. Just kind of how we how it, like, recreated itself, because we did this, like, acoustic version, and then there was a completely, like, remixed version, and it was neat to do that. It's at the end of the day, there's only so much time in the day, right. So it's hard to, like, well, do you spend that time on old material and doing things like that, or do you look forward? So it's hard to say if we'll ever have that time.
Yeah, I think as our career goes on, it'd be cool to do something like that. Even, like, Periphery did that instrumental album, where I think they just literally took the vocals off the songs,
and it was really good. It was really neat. Yeah,
it was really good. And even with our stuff, like, something as simple as taking the vocals away, you get to really hear all of the intricacies of the musicianship and production that's poured into each song. So I don't know, stuff like that. Yeah, as we get farther down this road, I think time will permit us to take some steps to. Yeah, it would be cool to have a greatest hits, but it's all remixed and, like, in like a not dubstep, but like an electronic kind of way. So it's a cool idea.
I always thought it was just kind of cool with that record because it came before, basically, I think, Meteora even. So it's like you had one record, then reimagined the record, and then some other random, like, songs that were in demo form or whatever, like My December at that point. And it was just kind of really cool, like a nice holdover between albums and just something completely different and out of left field. And I can totally see you guys doing that since, like you had said, kind of already dabbled in that a little bit. Right. So kind of been wrapping up. One of the last questions we've kind of been flirting around. You've kind of talked about, like, this sort of being the tail end of this album cycle. Have you guys already started demoing some new material? Do you have stuff ready, some ideas going, or?
Yeah, actually, like Ben and I have sent several ideas, maybe 5 or 6, back and forth to each other. It's like I just have, let me get this song idea out and send it to him, and then he'll program drums to it, and we just kind of listen back, and like there's some gems in there for all of them, but nothing like not a substantial amount. I know Johnny's probably has 5 to 10. Like,
you don't have 75
weird
songs ready to go.
No, no way. I mean, we have our treasure chest of hidden parts and random songs that didn't make the cut, and that's probably way up there. But we're definitely looking forward to the future and to what hasn't been come up with yet. We haven't been in the jam room together yet.
Yeah, one thing I love is like I have a scrap yard of like motorcycle parts and car parts that I kind of plug and play with the metal stuff, and literally the band has a scrap yard of riffs and bridges and like musical pieces that like started a song then got kicked out of its own party kind of thing. So there's a lot of material out there for us to draw from. But yeah, we're yeah, I think Willie Nelson said it's like songwriting is like a well, and when you're done with an album, it's just kind of dry, kind of burned out of it. But over the last year and a half, I think that well is totally filled back up, and we can all sense it, and we're excited where we're at, and to have the tools we have and the resources we have and the talent pool that we can reach out to, and we're stoked and ready to get that jam room running again.
Awesome. Well, where can everyone find you guys online?
Just Google Nothing More. You'll find everything there.
MySpace.com.
That still exists technically if you can log into it.
It does.
Yeah.
That's funny.
What was your profile song?
Oh,
Was it Emery?
I forgot about that.
It was probably like short skirt, long jacket.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
probably a Cake song. That was there. That was my Cake era.
Here's a weird question I've always wondered: does Cake tour? Is it just like one dude?
Dude, I don't think they do. I saw him one time, and this is the only tour I've ever known. This was like 8 years ago. I saw him at a New Year's Eve show in Austin. But yeah, it wasn't a tour. It was a one-off.
Okay.
So we've never seen him at a festival. I've never gotten, the Bands in Town app notification. I don't know.
It's just always like an anomaly band. Like they exist,
Yeah.
but like I don't know anything about them. I don't know who's in it.
Yeah, it's one of those bands that hates their popularity, I think. It's like, man, I don't want to do this. I just wanted to work at Geico.
Can't have your cake and eat it too, I guess.
Buzzing.
And we'll end it on that. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So that was my conversation with Mark Vollelunga and Daniel Oliver, bassist and guitar player for Nothing More. It was kind of funny leading up to the conversation. I'm a stickler for people and how they pronounce their names and so forth. And so when I was talking with Mark, I was like, is it Vollelunga or how do you pronounce it? And he goes, actually, yeah, that's exactly it. My family just recently found out that we were pronouncing it, and I think he said Vollelunga or something. I don't remember exactly how he said it. He was throwing some extra vowels in there. But his family, his dad, I believe, actually found out that is how you pronounce it, is Vollelunga. So his whole life, they've been saying their last name wrong.
That's interesting.
It was interesting. I kind of wish I had it recording when he said that.
That's kind of funny. Yeah, I was gonna say I don't remember hearing that on what you sent me, but sometimes you send these to me edited, so then I feel extra special.
Yeah,
but also a little bit left out. No, this was a lot of fun. I like it whenever you're like, so whenever you guys are on like arena level, what kind of stage stuff can we expect or whatever. Like I was just flat out like, yeah, honestly, I've just run out of ideas, which was a joke, but was still, it hit.
I mean, the fact that Daniel does as much as he does with coming up with, the Scorpion Tail, which if we've ever seen any live videos of Nothing More, I mean, first and foremost, they have the energy of a band like The Chariot or a band like Let Live or Every Time I Die or a lot of these hardcore bands, because Johnny, their vocalist, and the band themselves, they just run all over the stage and are a ball of energy, and it's a sight to see where you just don't know where to look because so much is happening. And especially once the Scorpion Tail thing, gets put into the stage, and you're just like, it takes what Clown and Chris Fane do from Slipknot with the rising drum risers and such, but is even more because it also is sort of speaking to how we were talking about Rammstein earlier, or even Marilyn Manson or any of those guys that have the keyboard player with the keyboards on the spring. It's that's sort of what the Scorpion Tail is. It moves, it rises, it does so much shit, and You know, it kind of has a very steampunk vibe since it's made out of like scrap metal parts and shit, and
Yep.
it's wild. There's a lot to take in when you're at a Nothing More show. And this tour actually that I saw them on was just really, it's really interesting. You got a band like Bad Flower who we had on the show, and we will be putting that episode out shortly. And then you have a Mice and Men who have been going through a really great resurgence since losing Austin Carlisle, and then Nothing More, and the opening band was Palisades. So like you got a little bit of something for everybody, really. Like we made a joke a couple episodes ago about Ryan from Fit for a King, wanting to potentially do something that's either like a radio rock band or a death metal band. And I'm not saying any of the bands are death metal by any stretch, but like I think like all of those genres are kind of well represented on this tour that Nothing More put together, which I think showcases that this band, having a wide array of sounds themselves, also isn't afraid to bring out a lot of different bands. Like they're not afraid to have a band that might be quote unquote heavier than them, or be more mainstream radio rock than them, or something completely altogether different. And I think that's something that's really admirable about what Nothing More has been doing over their career, between doing this limbo of being a headlining band to being a solid 2 to 3 out of 4 band on an arena level tour. But yeah, so I would strongly encourage, if you guys get to go see Nothing More anytime they're playing near you, go see them. It's definitely well worth the price of admission. All that being said, tonight I am, speaking of kind of stepping out and branching out of things maybe that you aren't necessarily the most familiar with, I have a Bell's Larry's latest Flamingo Fruit Fight. It is a tart fruit ale brewed with passion fruit and limes. It is... Admittedly, I am not a sour fan. But I was hanging out with some friends. They bought some beers. They are into sours. And this is some beers that they bought and then ended up subsequently leaving with me. And in the spirit of this podcast, I thought I would try a different beer and expand my palate. I gotta say, it's sour and tart, and there's passion fruit. And I personally am not a fan. I will drink the rest of this can begrudgingly, because I hate to see a beer go to waste. But yeah, Dan, what are you drinking?
Oh, I've been drinking Cash Money, which is so clearly you weren't ready for that one. But no, Cash Money is an Imperial IPA, which according to the can is brewed with a wasteful amount of the very best hops they could secure. And yeah, it's a really good it's another 4-hands beer. But it's a lot of fun. The can's really cool. This is one I'll probably end up sending to John at some point, because it's got that old school rap vibe. There's a parental advisory sticker on the can.
Tight.
And it's just got a fist with like 5 rings on it. It's
Unity.
a lot of fun. Yeah, but yeah, Cash Money is worth it for sure.
That sounds way better than what I'm drinking. Dan can actually see the faces I'm making as I'm drinking this begrudgingly, but you know what? I think that's the fun thing about drinking in general, and we kind of touched on it a little bit in the intro. I mean, there's so much variety, and it's the same thing with music. Even if I don't necessarily like this, I definitely I taste everything that it says it is, and it totally hits all the marks that it says it does. It's just not for me. It's not a thing I'm into. And you know what the weird thing is, though, is a couple years ago, I hated gin. Now I love it. So maybe in a couple years, like a fruit ale or a tart or a sour beer will be what I'm really all about. But for right now, my palate just isn't really digging this beer, this ale. But I will say the can is pretty cool. It's pretty...
Yeah.
It's got flamingos fighting over some fruits. And,
I would try it based just on the can.
Yeah, the can. I mean, that's it. It got me. Like, I wasn't gonna buy it, but when my friends got it, I was like, I mean, that looked pretty cool. I mean, the can looks really sweet. And Bell's is kind of hit or miss for me. Bell's either really knocks beers out of the park. Like, I just recently saw a billboard that said Two Hearted is like the #1 selling beer in America.
Yeah.
Which at first I was like calling bullshit on. I was like, no, there's no way. But honestly, in a lot of the traveling we've been doing lately, and talking to a lot of bands who drink, they're always like, "Oh, do you got Two Hearted?" So I mean, Shit, I guess maybe it is one of the most because I guess probably like when you go to concerts and so forth or go to a lot of venues, it's probably one of the decent craft beers that maybe they have on draft. So I guess I could see Two Hearted being a widely distributed enough that it might be like the number one beer in America. But I still feel like it's got to be Bud Light, honestly.
It has to be Bud Light. I mean, how many Bud Lights do you think they sell at any baseball game?
Oh God, how many?
All of it, right?
How many Bud Lights do you see being drank at any concert?
Dude, I'm probably a mile away from 4,000 empty Bud Light cans.
I think we both are.
Yeah. A lot of natty lights out here, though, because we're poor down here.
Oh, okay. P-O-U-R.
Yes.
But kind of in wrapping up this episode, if you would like to keep up with all things Nothing More, you can find them on Facebook at Nothing More, Instagram at Nothing More Music, and Twitter at Nothing More Rock. And if you would like to keep up with Mark, you can find him on Instagram and Twitter at Mark Vollelunga. The show notes will have his name spelled. I'm not going to spell it out for you. And Dan, if you want to follow him, he's on Instagram and Twitter at Dan Funk Railroad, which is a clever name. But sadly, he doesn't really do anything on either of those socials, so do with that as you will. If you would like to keep up with Metal Nexus, you can find them at metalnexus.net, Facebook at Metal Nexus, Instagram at metal.nexus, and Twitter at metal_nexus. And if you would like to keep up with Dan, Dan will tell you right now where he can be found.
Well, right now I can be found at my house, more specifically the basement. If you don't know where that is, send me a message. I'm sure I'll totally just send you where I'm at. And but you can also find me more traditionally on Facebook under Daniel Terry. You can find me on Twitter at Discuss Metal Dan. And you can even find my other podcast, Discography Discussion, if you're so inclined, at discussmetal.com.
And if you would like to keep up with all things the podcast, you can find us simply on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at BrewSpeakPod. Email us at BrewtallySpeaking@gmail.com. And if you would like to be a show sponsor, email us as well. And for our show sponsor, we have The Bean Bastard. As always, find them at thebeanbastard.com and follow them on Facebook and Instagram at The Bean Bastard. For the Brewtally Speaking Podcast, I am John.
And I am Dan.
And we will talk to you guys next time.